Alastor Glendon rips down the broken post-apocalyptic highway on his motorcycle as Sarkic bikers furiously chase him, firing bone arrows out of their anomalous crossbows crafted from living flesh. He ducks and weaves between the burnt-up husks of abandoned cars and narrowly misses one by a fraction of an inch. He has to be careful. If the bikers or the blobs don't kill him, a split second of careless driving will. But he can't stop. He's got a score to settle. And before he can take his revenge on the one who caused all his pain, he needs to pass through Sarkic territory and hunt down the monster that killed him. Alastor can hear the arrows whizzing past his head. One grazes his cheek, and the wound hurts more than one its size should. That's a little of that Sarkic magic for you. He whips out his revolver and returns fire without slowing. A bullet grazes one of the biker's legs, but he just shrugs it off, unflinching, too excited by the thrill of the chase to even care. Alastor dodges more arrows and spots blob monsters slithering amongst the cars up ahead, reaching out with grasping pseudopods. Another slithers out into the middle of the road, gibbering the usual madness about unity in the light. With a powerful blast of shadow, the blob is blown to pink smithereens, and Alastor's bike tears through the space the monster had once occupied. As Alastor's bike rumbles down the highway, one of the bikers, bigger than the rest and sporting a red leather jacket with a mohawk, gains on him. He speaks some ancient incantation in a dead tongue and holds up his arm. His fingers fuse and his hand morphs into a giant claw made of razor-sharp bone. The mohawk biker swings for Alastor, but the Shadow Man dodges, just barely avoiding losing his head. But Mohawk made a fatal mistake. In going in for a melee strike, he exposed himself to an attack from Alastor. A spear made of shadow extends from Alastor's palm and fires with lethal accuracy right through Mohawk's heart. The Sarkic tumbles off his bike and falls dead amongst the abandoned cars. His friends don't pay his demise much thought, speeding around him to continue the chase. They follow Alastor onto a crumbling overpass, each one morphing one of their appendages into a deadly flesh and bone weapon capable of delivering instantaneous death. As the onslaught comes in, Alastor hardens the shell of shadows around his body, hoping to stave off at least some of the anomalous attack. But that protection doesn't extend to the bike. One of the bone arrows strikes his fuel tank, and he immediately catches a waft of the acrid fuel stench. It smells like trouble. The leaking gasoline trails behind him, carrying the risk of turning him into a burning pile of twisted metal if he makes a wrong move now. He's just lucky that the Sarkicists don't like fire either, or he'd already be flambéed. There's a meaty popping sound as one of the Sarkic bikers raises his arm, firing something out of the palm of his hand. Alastor feels a mass make contact with his back. Not a bullet, not an arrow. A fleshy, spider-like creature with barbed claws on the ends of its spindly legs has attached itself to the doctor's back. It wastes no time in crawling up his leather jacket, attaching itself to his shoulder, and starts piercing his skin, tearing away with gleeful abandon. The Sarkic bikers always had some nasty tricks up their sleeves, or in their arms. Wincing in pain, Glendon tries to keep his focus on his driving while raising the revolver. By his count, he's got one shot left. He has to make it count. He takes aim and fires. The bullet strikes the creature on the shoulder, not a kill shot, but enough to send him flying off into the road, where he's chewed up under the roaring wheels behind him. Alastor twists the throttle and the engine responds by screaming and giving it all it has. He's finally starting to get away, building a gap between himself and the Sarkicists, but that's when he notices another obstacle. A vast section of the road in front of them has crumbled and collapsed, leaving a yawning chasm with a drop of at least 100 feet. If he's fast enough, he just might be able to do it. He might be able to make the jump. There's a loud bang as the bone arrow of a Sarkic crossbow punctures his back wheel. He immediately loses control, the bike hitting the ground and spinning, sending both Alastor and his motorcycle careening over the edge of the chasm. He grips onto the bike for dear life as it tumbles down and smashes into the ground, exploding into a massive fireball. Were it not for Alastor's shadow shields, he would have been killed. Instead, he's just injured, strewn out across the ground with the burning bike next to him. Alastor gives a silent thanks to the deceased Dr. Gears and SCP-914 The Clockworks, which had granted him his phenomenal new abilities. No time to dwell. He sees the rest of the Sarkic bikers standing over the edge of the broken overpass high above. The one who seems to be their leader, at least now that Mohawk is dead, calls down to him.
Oh man, you're gonna wish that fall killed you. Now you're gonna have to deal with what's down there.
Laughing at his plight, the Sarkic bikers retreat, leaving Alastor alone in the dark below the overpass. If he was an idiot and got himself killed or changed now, then he would never get his revenge on the man who caused him so much pain. The one who'd betrayed him, who ripped him out of a dream and plunged him into this endless nightmare. He couldn't allow that to happen. No, not while he lived and breathed. He would have his vengeance, even if he had to burn down what was left of the world to get it. With no time to waste, Alastor dusted himself off and started wandering through the dark. The space beneath the underpass had once been a tent city, it seemed, a refuge for the looked down upon and forgotten. There were the broken remains of cardboard forts, torn and decaying tents. Some of the people who'd once called this sad and desperate place home had likely been turned into the blobs that were wandering the highway now. Or, as Alastor would soon find out, something even worse. Damn Sarkists, he thinks. They never would have been this bold in the past. But with the collapse of the SCP Foundation during the advent of When Day Breaks, the bizarro cults, splinter cells, and anomalous organizations that the Foundation once called groups of interest ruled the night. The Global Occult Coalition worked with some of the remnants of the Foundation to set up checkpoints and support schemes, marshaling weapons and forces to launch larger attacks on some of the amalgamations of blob creatures created by the new sun. They'd even formed shaky alliances with some members of the Serpent's Hand, who didn't feel the same urge to defy the Foundation in a classic Broken Veil scenario. The Chaos Insurgency, true to their name, thrived in the chaos of this new world. They raided unguarded Foundation containment sites, pilfering any anomalous technology they could use to their advantage in the brutal struggle that had emerged between survivors. Of all the groups out there, they were the best trained, the most well-armed, and the most dangerous, and they were both willing and eager to subjugate anyone who opposed them. Meanwhile, the Sarkists and the Mechanists, the technology-loving cyborg apostles of the Broken God, had become violent, squabbling street gangs, either killing or converting anyone unlucky enough to come into contact with them. Tonight, that unlucky person had just so happened to be ex-Foundation researcher and current revenge-seeking anomaly, Dr. Alastor Glendon, who made the mistake of wandering through Sarkic territory. Alastor continued walking amongst the cardboard and the tents, trying his best to stay out of sight in the case that the Sarkic bikers came down here to hunt him. If Alastor could get his hands on one of the bikers alive, he could extract some valuable information, the location of a certain creature that was going to play a pivotal role in his plot. But before he can do that, he needs to get out of this pit, find a road, and a vehicle. The fall had exhausted him. It would be another few hours before he could use his shadow abilities to their full potential. Down here, he was vulnerable. There was something off about the tent city. There was a strange smell, not like the smell of the blobs that he was intimately familiar with by now. The smell down here was sickly sweet, rot, the stench of death. Something ancient and evil, the product of deep, Sarkic magic. Alastor had encountered the Sarkicists and their many related anomalies during his time at the SCP Foundation, and he imagined that they rather enjoyed everything that the new world had brought. They were worshippers of disease, corruption, transformation. The aftermath of Breaking Day was far more in line with their vision of utopia than the old world had ever been. His train of thought is interrupted when he steps on something soft and wet. At first, he assumes it's a fragment from another blob, but when he looks down, he can't help but see that it's redder. He's standing on what looks like a giant vein, as though the ground beneath him has developed a vascular system. He looks around and sees that what looks like skin has been growing on the vast concrete masts holding up the overpass. The whole area around him has started growing corrupted flesh, like living, rotten meat. Years of Foundation training flashes through Alastor's mind in an instant. He knows exactly what he's dealing with, as the thought dawns on him with absolute horror. SCP-610 The Flesh that Hates. They must have been hiding from the sun in the protective shade of the underpass during the day, then slithering out to hunt at night. Even in the world made by the breaking day, the sun and the blobs did not have a monopoly on terror. Before Alastor even had time to calculate his next thought, they start emerging from the darkness. The twisted corruptions that had once been human, but were now anything but. Too many limbs, tendrils, claws, hooks, twisted faces, or no faces at all. The dream of the Sarkissists come true, surrounding Alastor on all sides, with no way to fight back. One of the monsters lumbered towards Alastor, raising an arm that had become a huge club, made of meat and bone, which it brought down in a devastating strike. Alastor barely managed to dodge, slightly slower reaction time, and he would have been crushed. From behind, a monster with too many legs and arms squeals in, its gaping maw filled with teeth which were once human rib bones. A long, prehensile tongue darts out, hoping to wrap around Alastor's body. He made a weak shadow shield and darted out of the way as it was pulled into the mouth of the monster. The abomination seemed to be zeroing in from every angle, excited by the prospect of another human stranger to add to their ranks. Alastor noticed a gap in their flanks and ran for it, staying just out of reach of the grasping limbs of the deceased. This was a holy place for the Sarkissists. To everyone else, Alastor included, it was a nightmare made of hateful flesh. Alastor ran with the monsters forming a conga line of horrors behind him. If he remembered one consistent weakness that the Foundation recorded about the flesh that hates, it was fire. He needed to get back to the total bike if there was any hope of him surviving this one. The disease spread primarily through skin-to-skin contact. Nobody was immune. Nobody. If a single one of these monsters made contact with his bare skin, he was already dead. On his way back to the flaming bike, another flesh monster intercepted Alastor, a huge, lumbering horror with an arm twisting into a buzzsaw made of pure bone. It wheeled with a terrible shriek as the monster swung it in Alastor's direction. He hit the dirt, the organic weapon passing over his head. There would have been nothing left of him if it had made contact, but Alastor didn't have time to contemplate his mortality. He rose up again and continued his mad dash for the flaming bike, driven by his thirst for vengeance. These monsters would not kill him. They didn't have the right. Just like the blobs and the Sarkissists, they were beneath his grand purpose. Alastor reached the bike, bathed in its orange glow, getting as close as he could without getting burned himself. The flesh amassed in a circle around him, frustrated and impatient at the prey it was being denied. They howled and raged and squealed, occasionally reaching out with gnarled, twisted limbs before losing confidence in the warmth of the flame. But this situation would not be safe for long. The fire on the bike would die eventually, but if it didn't, eventually the sun would come up. He'd be exposed. It was a stalemate that would be deadly soon enough, one way or the other. The flesh had numbers and time on their side. And it was exactly as this realization set in that Alastor would receive help from a most unlikely ally. The racket created by the flesh had attracted undue attention from a neutral party, the blobs, servants of the new sun. They started slithering in, hundreds of them, all talking their madness, preaching the gospel of the light. It was one of the most repulsive confrontations Alastor had ever seen, corrupted flesh against corrupted flesh, as hundreds of blobs poured into the diseased tent city. The blobs tried to meld with and absorb the monsters of the flesh, getting themselves infected, rashes and lesions spreading across their gelatinous meat. It was chaos, and during this chaos, Alastor had his best chance to escape. He coated himself in shadows and ran through the body horror nightmare. Gloopy voices speaking fanatical nonsense melded with the animalistic shrieking of the flesh. They were so focused on each other, they forgot that Alastor was even there, a fact that he was more than happy to take advantage of. Neither side would know who won until sunrise, and Alastor would be long gone before then. They could burn together for all he cared. Within a couple of hours, Alastor had escaped the madness below and climbed back up to the other side of the broken overpass. There, the Sarkic bikers were waiting, astonished by his return. The new world was full of surprises, but few were more surprising than the survival of Dr. Alastor Glendon after being sacrificed to the domain of the flesh that hates. But they didn't intend to let him get away with that. They readied their weapons of flesh and prepared to charge, ready to cut down this meddlesome trespasser once and for all. But Alastor did not have the patience to play games with these jokers anymore. The sun would be up in a few hours, and they had something he needed. Before the Sarkic bikers could assemble themselves against him, he released a blast of shadow, knocking them from their bikes, rendering them shocked and helpless. He stepped forward, letting off the aura of a man driven by pure hatred and fury. A living, vengeful ghost. The Sarkicists, for the first time in a long time, knew terror. He cleared his throat and said, "If you want to live and serve your idols of corruption and flesh another day, you'll tell me, where can I find the old man?" Now go check out SCP-001 When Day Breaks or SCP-610 The Flesh That Hates for more.